What the Tech is sponsored by Audible.com, the internet's leading provider of audiobooks, with more than 100,000 downloadable titles across all types of literature. For a free audiobook of your choice, go to audiblepodcast.com/Andrew. And by Stitcher Radio. Listen on the go via the Stitcher mobile app. For more information, go to stitcher.com/GFQ.
What the Tech?
Hey everybody, welcome to What the Tech, the end of the year episode of What the Tech, the last episode for 2012. This is our best of 2012 when it comes to tech products, tech software, anything that has to do with technology. I'm Andrew Zarian, and we're going to be talking about technology for the next hour. And I'm joined by my co-host, Paul the Bruiser Thurrott. How you doing, Paul?
Pretty good. How are you?
I'm just going to give you like old 70s like wrestling gimmick names.
Nice.
Like the Crusher and the Bruiser.
Yeah, like an Ernest Borgnine type name.
Yeah. A lot of stuff happened this year. Last week, we had our worst stuff, which people love. They love to hear us complain about things that we hate.
Now I'm going to talk about stuff I like.
Now we're going to talk about stuff we like, and we have a pretty decent list this year. But one thing that we forgot to mention, and I got, so many emails about this product that we totally forgot to mention was the Google Q.
Yeah.
I totally forgot that this thing existed.
Right. I think that was part of the plan. It was dumb when they announced it. It was confusing, and then they just kind of got rid of it. You know?
So stupid.
Google's a strange company. I wouldn't be surprised to hear that it comes back, after they've improved it in some way. But it was just so pointless, and it's just so unnecessary.
I mean, the Nexus Q was one of this bizarre product that they unveiled, and they did nothing to explain what it actually is, considering Google TV exists.
Right.
And you just stood there saying, okay, what is this? And the only thing I learned from that presentation is that your friends could control your MP3 list.
Crazy.
Wow. Whew. Let's get nutty. But today we're going to talk about the things that we like. Okay. And since we're on the Google topic, I do want to go with this as my first product that I really thought they did a great job, and we saw a shift in this market, and that's the Android tablet market. Google unveiled the Nexus tablet, their flagship tablet, the clean Google experience, and it totally took off. Phenomenal 7-inch tablet. They unveiled the 10-inch tablet a couple months ago. This is now the standard that every Android tablet must follow.
I don't even understand why anyone would bother at this point.
Getting
I think those
something
tablets
else.
are so good. Yeah, the interesting thing about the Nexus 7 is that it did two things. One is it kicked off this 7-inch tablet kind of fad in a big way. I mean, the Kindle Fire obviously came out last year, but I think it was the Nexus 7 that really firmly established it, so much so that Apple had to release a 7-inch tablet this year, basically. The other thing is, the Nexus 7 came out some months ago, and then more recently was updated to Jelly Bean. And actually, the way it is today, if you were to buy one of these right now, it's even better. I think it's just a beautiful tablet.
What, the 7-inch one?
Yeah.
Yeah, I have one right here, and my battery's dead, so there's nothing on it. But I really have to tell you, this thing is great. I mean, it's an unbelievable device.
It's ideal size. Shape too, and by shape I don't mean rectangular before someone says that. I mean, but it's got kind of it's not too wide. It's easy to hold in one hand. It's got that nice kind of grippy back, or I don't know what you call it. It's kind of almost like pockmarked kind of back.
It's like rubbery.
It's nice. Yeah, it's nice.
It's a nice rubbery back.
It's a nice machine. It's not. Someone in the chat room says that it's cheap, and I know by cheap they mean inexpensive. It's not cheap in the sense that it's like this plasticky toy.
Well, that was always the argument. That was always the argument with these Android tablets that, well, in order to cut costs, if you're going to be below where the iPad is, you're going to compromise build quality. And I have to tell you, the build quality on this thing is great. Yeah, you don't have a rear-facing camera. The front-facing camera is not that great, but who needs a camera on this?
You don't need it for that. This is not, again, the 7-inch market is what I think these tablets used to all be, which is just a consumption device. It's for content. And you don't need the camera on that kind of thing. I mean, it has a front-facing camera. I would never use it. But It's just a nice machine. It's nice. It just feels good.
You know, there was a time period when I got this, when I got the tablet. I ordered it thinking, well, if I use it, I use it. It's just another device. I could just lay it on the table. Because I was totally against the whole 7-inch tablet concept. I really like the iPad. I like the size of the iPad. The screen real estate was great on that. So when I got this, I picked it up and I'm like, you know what? This is not that bad.
Yes.
And I used it exclusively probably for like 2-3 months.
You know, when the iPad first came out, it was very easy to criticize because obviously there was a lot of, missing features and so forth. But the one thing I really feel, it's like maybe the one thing in the last decade I've actually gotten right was I said at the time, this thing smaller would be better. Yeah, a little smaller would be better. And I felt like there was an ideal size for these tablets that was, roughly in the 7-inch size. And now that they're out in quantity, and there are good choices too. I mean, the Kindle Fire HD is great. The iPad Mini is great. Clearly, this is going to be, I think this is going to be a volume market. And this is going to be a device type that's going to eat into sales of not just the iPad and other big tablets, but also like iPod Touch type devices. That if you're a gamer, obviously, or someone who watches movies or TV shows, obviously the big screen is superior for that kind of stuff. And it's not a bad machine to cart around just, for general media. I mean, obviously you can't really put it in your pocket unless you have like carpenter pants or something, but it's a nice machine.
One thing that I thought we would see this year and we kind of didn't was this concept of magazines subsidizing tablets and selling you, you get the tablet for free. So if you sign up for the New York Times for, a 1-year deal, you get a free tablet.
Right.
And I thought we would get more publishers doing this, and we didn't get it. I thought the Nexus tablet, when they announced this, I thought they were going to announce, like, okay, we're also going to be working with this media group, this whatever publisher, where if you sign up for 3 magazines a year, you'll get a free tablet. And they were going to kind of push their online magazine like that. But I didn't see that happen. But a device like this, easily you could subsidize it, and easily it's a disposable device because you spend $200, $180, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And after 2 years, you know what? You pick up another one.
That's the thing. And I've always felt like the problem with the Apple model is that Apple designs its products to be obsolete in a year or 2 years at most. And Apple's customers are very eager to upgrade, and those devices are really expensive by and large. And once you get down to a less expensive device like this, $200 is an amazing price point and is basically disposable for a lot of people. But the other thing is it's not truly disposed of, right? This device, if you stop using it, will go to your wife or to your kids or to a friend or some other family member, and that's what's kind of neat about that. And there's kind of a trickle-down effect, and it's much easier to make that transition when the product itself is very inexpensive.
I mean, let's compare it to the PC market, right? Over the last 5 years, the prices of computers have dropped tremendously.
Yeah, actually,
and
so
to
I don't
the
get
point
out
that,
in the real world a lot,
Yeah,
but I was just telling. I think I was telling you. I was in Best Buy, and I was very struck. In fact, the PCs and the tablets are basically right next to each other now, and the PCs cost as much as the tablets, right? They had a deal this weekend at Best Buy that was a Dell computer with a bunch of other stuff for $299, but basically the price of these things was usually $350, $400, maybe $500 tops, and just a crazy amount of selection in that price range for a PC laptop. And I really do feel like there's a market for that kind of thing, and that's a good price to pay for just a pedestrian work-a-day kind of home computer, because tablets are nice and you can browse the web and do email and stuff, but every once in a while you really want to have that kind of Microsoft Word type experience or whatever. And it is amazing to me how cheaply you can buy a PC. I have no doubt that I could do almost everything that I need to do on that kind of a computer. And that is just, it's amazing. Maybe that should be on the list.
I guess the PC, right? I purchased a laptop for my wife for Christmas. She doesn't know, so we're going to whisper even though she's not here. Just the illusion that she's sitting behind me and listening.
Gotcha.
So I ordered...
I sort of imagine it that way.
Yeah, she's
going to rise up out of the bottom of the frame like Chuck Norris in some Vietnam movie.
We should do that. I ordered
I heard you were talking about me.
So what is this about a laptop? I got our Lenovo IdeaPad, the S405 series. 14-inch laptop. It was on sale at Staples yesterday, $349.
Right.
I didn't even think twice about it because it was $349 for a 14-inch laptop. It's a dual-core AMD, not the greatest processor, but totally fine for what she's going to be using it for. Came with a 500 gig hard drive. I ordered an SSD that I'm going to drop in this thing tomorrow. But $349, I picked up a phenomenal laptop. It's super thin, so it has a form factor of an Ultrabook, but it's not an Ultrabook. Build quality, great. Display looks phenomenal. $349.
Yeah.
I mean, you're not thinking about it. I mean, you're like, okay, that's a great deal. Let me pick it up. You'll use it for 2 years. You pick up another laptop. I think this has changed a lot. The concept of buying these devices, not holding on to them for 4 or 5 years as your primary computer, that we've seen that shift over the last 2 years.
Yeah, I sometime in the past year bought a pretty big desktop computer, like a tower computer, and I did it sort of thinking that this was going to be this is probably going to be the last one. You know, that not that I'm not going to stop, not that I'm not going to be buying more PCs, but rather that this kind of monolithic, old-fashioned kind of thing is probably the end of the road for that kind of thing. And I don't really need the space inside anymore for whatever, and you know. It's kind of pointless. I do a lot of work with virtual machines and so forth, so I can justify it in various ways. But you know, even on a desktop computer, a Mac Mini type computer, and there are several choices like that, are very viable. And those things run basically the same kind of mainstream chipsets that you see in laptops today. Yeah. So it's pretty amazing. We
kind of got off track, but I do want to stick with the Google thing as my next pick. Okay. And I want to talk about Android. I think this was the year that Android...
Yeah.
And this is weird coming from me because I'm so critical of Android, but I do feel they surpassed iOS as far as the UI goes, and iOS became outdated looking compared to Android. And I'm quite critical of Android because of the experience. I don't think the experience is there yet. I think it's still quite buggy.
I guess so, but honestly, I think that's come a long way too.
Oh yeah, tremendously. I think it's been a total shift, but Jelly Bean, in my opinion, totally changed it. And it's much. I'm trying to think. If I went into Android just as my first Android device would have been Jelly Bean, what would my experience have been? Probably a lot more positive than now.
I think so. Yeah.
So I think they came a long way. Now the only thing that to me affects Android is the manufacturers putting all that stuff on there, and that makes it very difficult.
That's why you go with the pure Google experience when you can, or you buy a Kindle Fire type device, which is a completely different equation. You're not really buying into Android at that point. Yeah, I was always very critical of Android. For many reasons. I think it was it Honeycomb, the one they did for tablets for that 1 year where it was just kind of a tablet thing.
Yeah.
That got my attention because it seemed like there was some design work going on and that they seemed to be getting there. And then since then, and especially with Jelly Bean, we've had 2 releases of that, I guess. It really seems like it's kind of coming together. And when you look at it on a phone or you look at it on like this Nexus 7 tablet that I have, it's clean looking, it's modern looking, and it's not just, it's funny, it's not just the operating system. It seems like a lot of the stuff in Android is just getting better. The Google Play stuff has come a long way since the days of Android Marketplace. It looks better. It's got more content. It seems more cohesive.
I would actually say that the marketplace on Android is far better than the App Store experience on iOS now that they changed iOS.
I don't know.
I'm not talking about the games. I'm not talking about the development.
The actual experience of the store?
The actual experience of the store. It's awful on the iPad 2. Now, the iPad 2 is an older device, obviously, but they're still selling it. It's slow.
Oh.
It takes a while to load, which I don't understand why. And when you're scrolling it's not super fast.
Yeah, I don't use an iPad 2, so I'm not really sure what that's like. But, if you look at the way that the iOS store is designed across the PC experience, the small form factor like an iPod. I have an iPod Touch, not an iPhone, or an iPad. They do a pretty cohesive job of, making that stuff look okay across the board. It's not horrible. I mean, the one problem I have with the Google stuff, and I just don't really ever think this is going to get fixed, is that they're really very much focused just on Android. So there's some stuff you can kind of do through the website on a PC, but you can't. You're never going to be able to buy like an HD movie on Google, I don't think, and watch it in HD on a PC, other than perhaps on, well, maybe through YouTube. I should look that up. Maybe you can do it through YouTube, but it just seems like kind of a half-hearted type of thing, because they don't have to. They don't have to bother with the PC. It's all about Android.
Talking about the PC, Paul. Let's talk about Windows 8. And we both had this on our list, but you had a big question mark. Best of 2012, does Windows 8 fall in that category?
Yeah. I have to say yes. I mean, ultimately, for all of the complaining, for all of the criticisms about the lack of a start button or a start menu and all that kind of stuff, I think Windows 8 has to make the list because it represents something that we have never been able to associate with Microsoft in the past, and that is moving quickly. That Microsoft saw the future, saw that it was going to be highly mobile and highly connected, and that it was going to be devices and not these traditional PCs. And rather than just sort of slow boil their way to that point like they would have in the past, or done something horrific like make another kind of device that wasn't Windows, they just threw it in. They just threw it in Windows, and I think that was so smart. And obviously, the downside of it, and the reason there's a question mark, is that Windows 8, as it is today, the mobile part of it, the Metro interface, is not complete. And it's something that they're going to be working on over the next year and more to get it there and to mature it and so forth. But this is rapid fire innovation of a type that Microsoft is just not known for. And I have to put it in the plus column, because they've just never done anything like it. It's amazing. Yeah,
because generally when there's an operating system that comes out, it's a slow progression to the next one. It takes a couple of years, and then here is the next one. But it seems like 2013 will be a rapidly changing year for Windows 8.
Or put another way, I mean, Microsoft is a company that has typically allowed other companies to innovate in new markets, and then they kind of lumber along and they take it for themselves. And Windows 8 was, is not in some ways it's obviously a reaction, but I mean, it happened kind of concurrently with a bunch of other stuff, and they aren't doing what Apple's doing here, right? They are very decidedly going in a completely different direction than Apple.
Oh, totally different direction. And it to me, it seems like as far as innovation goes for their operating system, Microsoft is far more aggressive than Apple. And it was it was the opposite discussion.
Well,
every OS 10 release. More than I mean, every OS 10 release had something big in it. There were some major changes here and there. Now, Apple has been sitting on this operating system since, let's say Leopard. From Leopard to now, very slow, very, very tiny little changes here and there, but pretty much is the same exact thing. If you pick up Tiger and you pick up Leopard, it's the same thing.
I think the bigger issue, though, is actually the mobile stuff, because the software interface in iOS has not changed basically at all since the early days. And it's interesting to see Apple, once it has a huge market like Microsoft, respond in the same way that Microsoft did, which is slowly evolve. Next year, we might be talking about iOS in this list. If someone mentioned Johnny Ives in the chat room, we know he's taking over the software design. If he does as good of a job with the user experience on iOS devices as he did with the hardware, we might be having a completely different conversation next year. But as of today, iOS 6 point whatever, it's iOS 1.0. It's the same thing.
But is that a risk thing? I mean, when we're talking about, why hasn't iOS changed over the last 5 years? Is it because
I actually believe that one of the big reasons that Scott Forstall's gone is because he was the one pushing this kind of evolution of a revolution thing. I think that when Apple does their best work, as annoying as it can be to people, it's when they throw everything away and just start over from scratch. That they're so good at doing that. That they successfully push these major transitions through so often. It's needed again for iOS, and so they've always done a great job with the hardware. This is their chance to do the same with the software. It just hasn't happened yet. So I think that will happen, but that's for next year. I mean, today I would say that it is Microsoft that is doing the most aggressive work in mobile/PC operating systems, because in this case it's in both. And like, we can talk about how it's a Frankenstein monster, because it is. It's kind of crazy. It's like you got your mobile platform and my PC OS. It is like that. To me that's entertaining, but it's also a very interesting strategy. And again, it may not prove to be successful. It may prove to be successful. I know some people like it and some people don't. Whatever. But I think we got to put it in the plus column, like I said, because they just went for it. It's amazing. It's I don't really think there's any precedent for this kind of a thing at Microsoft before, except for things that never happened. Like Cairo was going to be like this, a project they were working on in the 1990s, or Longhorn, the project from the early 2000s that never came to fruition. This is the first time they've done something that insane and actually shipped the damn thing. I mean, it's in a very short amount of time.
Yeah,
it's pretty impressive.
We've also seen Microsoft become a hardware manufacturer. A hardware company, because now they're making their own hardware, and I think this is something that we're going to see happen over the next couple of years, where we're going to see Microsoft kind of take control of the PC market, which I believe they have. They have to take control of this market.
Yep. This is the
and I'll tell you why. And I say this all the time, and Paul laughs when I bring up a trackpad.
Oh, I thought you were going to talk about Linux, but go ahead.
I'm not. What do I want you to have a stroke right here?
I know that the reason Microsoft is in the hardware market is because of Linux.
Because Linux is aggressive, and it's the future of computing. I don't know if you know that, Paul.
I've heard that. Yeah.
No, I'll give you the perfect example. I got the Lenovo here. Not a high-end computer. Well-built computer. Looks great in the display. And I was using a trackpad to kind of get a feel of it. They've really Lenovo's are known to have good components, but it's still missing something. And I feel that when I'm scrolling in Windows 8, I feel, in Metro, for example, I feel like it's missing some components. And I don't know if that's Microsoft that has to tweak the software for the hardware, or if it's the hardware that needs to be tweaked for the software. And that's the missing thing for me. If Microsoft grabs control of this market and they release, a laptop that is made by them to their specifications, I think the user experience will totally change. I really feel that they are crippled by these manufacturers.
So, yeah, I do. By the way, I do too. So, I assume I told this story on this podcast before, but I had dinner with some of the guys who do the Microsoft Store stuff, and I was telling them that I sort of saw this future where their relationship with the PC makers changed completely. In the past, Microsoft would make this software and they would hand it to PC makers, and then the PC makers would add their crap to it and they would put it on a machine and they would sell it. And they would typically sell it through their own store, maybe online, or typically online, or through companies like Best Buy or value-added resellers and so forth. I almost picture the future being completely the opposite, kind of relationship where the Microsoft Store is the primary retail space where PCs get sold, because these big box electronics companies are all going away. And that now these companies have to come to Microsoft to sell their wares. And how will that change the experience for end users? I think a lot, because at that point Microsoft can say, yeah, we'll sell your stuff through our store, but we have some standards, and those standards mean you can't put a trialware, baloney security thing on there. You can't put your crapper on there. You can't junk up the start screen with all your stupid stuff.
Yeah.
And that is going to be. And again, this is fanciful, and it's. I'm not necessarily saying this is what's going to happen, but you could almost see it happening, and I hope it happens, because these guys need to be taught a lesson. Frankly, these people have destroyed the PC experience. And it's bizarre because it was like, for most of them, it's their primary business. How could you do such a thing? It's like screwing long-term relationships with customers for short-term gains.
You know what I noticed on this laptop, Paul? The Lenovo is not known for bloatware. They don't really put too much crap on there. There's some, but they don't put a lot.
Yep.
On the desktop, there was nothing. Yeah. Not even McAfee was installed on desktop.
Right.
But in the Metro experience, those Metro apps, there were about 30 apps that were installed.
Sure.
Off from them. I mean, an eBay app, the McAfee app, a traveling app, third party, whatever.
Yeah, well,
and I found that fascinating.
One of the nicest things about the Metro environment is that you can get rid of every single one of those things, and it's super easy. Super easy. You don't have to go through that stupid.
Are you sure you want to uninstall? Are you positive? All
no,
right,
there's
now
none
we're
of
gonna
that.
reboot.
No, you don't. They can't even do that.
Yeah.
You just right click it, uninstall. You sure? Yep, done.
I thought that was interesting that they were going that way.
Yeah.
It almost feels like the PC manufacturer are like, oh no, this is the UI. This is what they're going to use. They're not going to use that stuff. I think it's a strange transitional period this year, and this is why Microsoft is kind of on the list. Even if you don't agree that Windows 8 is not the best of, you have to appreciate the fact that this is a huge step for the company, and this is a major risk and a major leap they've taken.
Yeah.
And
Well,
this is
for
the
same
progression.
reason that-
This is the future of the PC market. I mean, if you look a year from now, we'll probably look back at a lot of these things that we're complaining, like certain functions aren't in Metro. We're going to look back and be like, okay, well, you know what? Now it makes sense. They were adding it slowly. They were changing things as they were going along.
You know, I've been very critical of the Surface with Windows RT for various reasons, all of which are obviously valid. But this is also a statement by Microsoft where they're saying, look, this is the future of the PC. Sorry. You know, this is where it's going. It's going with or without us. You're welcome to join in. And some of the PC makers are going to get it. Some of them aren't. You know, some of them might continue as much smaller companies that sell traditional products to businesses. You know, and that might be it. I don't know. You know, it's kind of hard to say, but I think for the same reason that Windows 8 makes the list, that Surface has to make the list. Not because Surface with Windows RT is a killer product, but because it shows you the direction they're going with the hardware, which is beautiful. It is beautiful to look at. It's a beautiful device. I think that the Surface Pro is going to be a lot more interesting. I think a Clover Trail version of Surface would be more interesting still. But the Surface is such an amazing statement. And I look forward to the future of it because I'm starting to come around to the notion that maybe there needs to be a Surface phone. Maybe there will be Surface desktop all-in-one type hardware as well.
Now, I was about to say that. Do you like Surface as the brand, or do you like it as the product? I think as the brand, that's the future of this name.
The brand is a great brand. It's one of those things where, you know, they've obviously repurposed a name they used to use. And the first time you hear it, you're like, well, wait a minute. They already, and then you're like, wait, you know what? Actually, that makes a lot of sense. That's cool. It's a good name. It's not just the name, though. It's the, you know, it's kind of Apple-like, obviously, but they're trying to exude a level of quality. You know, Microsoft is not cheaping out on anything with the Surface. And, you know, we've talked before about the signature program that Microsoft has and how good that is. And this is kind of that writ large. You know, this is like, look, we can take a PC maker's PC and we can turn it into a decent machine, a really good machine with signature, or we could just do it ourselves.
Yeah.
You know? I think we're going to see more. I think there's going to be a lot more Surface devices next year, including.
I'm excited for it. I'm excited for that brand. I like the brand, and you know it's going to be well-built computers.
Yep. Yeah, you know you're getting quality.
If we talk about the hypothetical, you know, let's talk about the future and what Microsoft could potentially do with this. They could be just like Apple in the sense that they have their own stores, they sell their own products, and that's where you go to buy computers. You go to the Microsoft store to buy computers. This is what they have to do.
That's exactly what I was saying to those guys from Microsoft. That you know, one of the other things about going to the Best Buy is you see how crappily they, you know, display items and so forth. They're so terrible in so many ways.
But Paul, don't you think? I mean, we talk about Apple has what, like, let's say at most 10% of the computer market, right? Let's say. Yeah. Microsoft could do that instantly.
Sure.
And that's a big chunk for them to grab away from the OEMs. If they grab 10% of all computers are Microsoft branded computers on the market, that's huge.
I guess. I mean, I'm not positive that's the point, right? I think the point is their goal is to sell Windows. You know, people are going to want to buy Windows if the devices that Windows runs on are beautiful, if they're market leading, if they're better than what Apple sells. And I think they need to be in that. You know, I think that they need to show to people that this can be done right. You know, that when it isn't done right, it's not their fault. You know, the dark side of their relationship with PC makers is that for the past 20 years, people have had bad experiences with PCs. And by and large, a lot of those problems were brought on there by the PC maker, you know, who loaded it down with crap, had the wrong drivers, you know. I can't tell you, unfortunately, some of the horror stories I've heard about the state in which PCs ship. But if you sort of think about the permutations of hardware types and drivers, the bizarre incompatibilities that have occurred on shipping PCs in the past from major manufacturers is just horrific.
Oh my God! Yeah, they've gotten better, but it's
no
still
idea.
there. It's still awful.
Yeah, it's awful.
A relative of mine over the summer bought a Toshiba, and when they brought it back, they brought it home, and they called me. They go, "This is really slow. There's something wrong with it. I'm going to bring it back." I'm like, "Let me come by and let me take a look." I looked at it. There were 128 processes running in the background.
Yeah.
Yep. How do you ship that? How do you ship something like that and expect the satisfaction of the customer? Yep. It's impossible. And you know what? People aren't saying like, "Oh,
yeah,
this is bad." They're just dealing with it. This is they learn to live with it.
Well, they think that's what it is. And you know, again, from Microsoft's perspective, that's been the problem for many years now. So signature was one step and still is. And by the way, you know, if there's a particular computer you want to buy and there's a Microsoft store locally, especially because I think that's when signature makes the most sense, and they're selling that computer, by and large, I would recommend getting it from Microsoft, if only for that signature image that's on there. And it's fantastic. You know, it's gotten more sophisticated over the years. I was telling those same guys, you know, I was very interested on the Ultrabook I bought this year, which I did buy from the Microsoft store. You run the Samsung, in my case, restore process, which I was nervous about because I thought it was going to bring it back to the default Samsung image, but they've actually gotten into that as well. And so what it does is it restores it to the signature image. Right? So they've kind of completely taken over the machine. So even though you're using their, you know, the PC maker's restore process, what you're getting back is what you bought, which of course is what you should expect. And that wasn't always the case, by the way, obviously. And so it's neat that it's evolved to that point.
Yeah, and I think a lot of them are now realizing that, okay, we need to kind of pull back and not put all this Samsung junk on there. But Samsung's one of those companies that doesn't really put a lot, right? Or do they?
You know, they kind of do. I have that, the Samsung ATIV smart PC, whatever that, you know, kind of clover. That had a bunch of crap on it, actually. Some of it's okay. You know, this stuff is, again, people's reactions to this are always going to vary. I mean, this is stuff that nobody needs, I think. And then this is stuff some people might kind of want. You know, Samsung had like an S Note mobile app on there that you could, you know, do handwriting with a stylus and so forth. I don't find that kind of thing useful personally, but some people might. That one I need to, actually, I should restore that. Well, that one's I just got from Samsung. So that one just has the basic Samsung install in it. My Ultrabook is fantastic. I other than the fact that it's Windows 7, so it restores back to Windows 7, but it's so clean. I mean, it's so wonderfully clean, and they just do a really good job with that.
Something else that came out this year, and it was a big year for cloud computing. We saw Outlook.com, the new email service from Microsoft launch, and people loved it. And how is the adoption rate for this? How are people liking it? Are they using it?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I switched to Outlook.com immediately. In fact, I had earlier this year, before Outlook.com came out, switched to Hotmail, and Hotmail was fine. I mean, Outlook.com is awesome. I wish that my work allowed me to push my mail somewhere else, because if they did, I would only use Outlook.com. And so I use Outlook.com exclusively for my, you know, non-work email. And I use the web interface, which is beautiful. They still have not updated the calendar component, which is too bad. So when you go to email and people, those are the new interfaces, which are beautiful. And then you go to calendar, and it's like the, you know, it's like, oh my God,
look at, I have it pulled up right here. This is awful.
Yeah, it's too bad. So they'll get to that. I remember when this thing launched over the summer, they were telling me that calendar was not a huge priority because most people do that from their phones anyway, and they have, you know, obviously have all the great mobile interfaces for everything. So, yeah, Outlook.com is huge, but you know, it's not just. I mean, you don't have to switch to Outlook.com to realize the benefits of this stuff, right? Gmail is fantastic as well. Office 365 is great, and by the way, is about to get even better. I kind of wish some of the Office stuff could have been on this list, but the truth is most of it is relaunching, if you will, or coming out with new versions in early 2013. So we can maybe next year those things will be on the list. But this notion, and I keep going back to the Steve Jobs thing. You know, I think it was WWDC 2011 where Steve Jobs, and I think it was final appearance at a Apple event, talked about how they used to use, in their case, the Mac as the center of your digital hub. and that with the advent of iCloud, they were demoting the PC, as they should, and the Mac to just being one of the devices, and that everything should be up in the cloud. That I think the way he put it was that the truth is in the cloud, meaning the master copy, and that it just syncs to all your devices. And we talked about cloud computing rather aggressively, I think, a few weeks ago, but it's everything, right? It's email and PIM, it's music and podcasts and photos and music, and videos. It's your data through things like SkyDrive in my case, or if you use Dropbox or whatever services, all kinds of services.
Well, something that totally changed. I mean, you brought up music. We saw the launch of iMatch, the matching service. Was it iMatch? iMatch, right?
No, iTunes Match.
iTunes Match. Yep. And Google today or yesterday announced that they're coming up with their own matching service.
Oh, did they? Okay. So that's been the big missing piece for Google Music. They don't do matching yet. So I'm not surprised that they will. But, all of these, it's very interesting. I mean, I think music is a good one because it's just something I think everyone can kind of understand. Some people have their collections that they've, finely tuned over the years and they carry it around with them. Some people just want to listen to radio type stations, and they might use something like Pandora or Spotify or Xbox Music Pass or whatever. And there's all kinds of different ways to consume this stuff. And honestly, no matter what kind of or what ways, I mean, I think there are multiple ways to do it too, that you prefer. Music is one of those things where it really does make sense for it just to be in the cloud. And you can sync the stuff you need offline to the devices that you use and go with it. And no matter what you use, Android, iPhone, or iPod Touch, or Windows Phone, there are solutions on all of those devices where that stuff works. And I think this was the year that cloud computing really came of age, and it just makes sense. Even on a business side, if you have use something like SharePoint at work, for example. They have SharePoint Online through Office 365, which again is getting a lot better next month. But it's the same exact theory. They have something they call SkyDrive Pro, which used to be called something else, but they're calling it SkyDrive because people like that name, which basically does the same thing. It gives you that ability to sync your SharePoint your SharePoint content down to your PC so that you can access it offline, and it synchronizes it with the cloud. In this case, the cloud being SharePoint Online.
What would you say was the biggest story for 2012 as far as a product that came out? The biggest product? Would you go with Windows Phone?
No, I mean Windows Phone is really just an evolution, even though the underpinning it is huge, right? It's Windows 8. From a user perspective, it's just an evolution. I mean, Windows Phone has always been great. Windows Phone was so great right out of the box. It's like they obviously have missing pieces they need to evolve. One of the problems with Windows Phone 8, and it's on my list for picks for this year, but also with a question mark. And the reason for the question mark is twofold. I mean, one is it doesn't have a lot of market share, and it probably never will. But the second one is that, unfortunately, when you ship a new version of a product on a completely different platform, little things get dropped off along the way. And there's a lot of little things. In fact, as time goes by, we're starting to find out more and more. A lot of little things that got dropped off with Windows Phone 8. There's a long, long list. But some of the more obvious ones include the inability, the utter inability to rent a movie, or buy a TV show or a movie and get it on your phone. There is literally no way to do that through the Microsoft ecosystem right now. And there was in Windows Phone 7X.
But why isn't there one?
No one's talking. So I don't know. Maybe those things were just on different timelines, and it will be added over. It has to be added over time. I'd be shocked if it wasn't added over time. But the podcast stuff dropped off the face of the earth in Windows Phone 8. It can't play ringtones that are WAV files for some reason, even though the OS can play WAV files. I mean, there's a lot of just weird little things, and it's a maturity issue. And I think with Windows 8 as well, you're going to see those two things, improve over time. So I think rather than pick a single, to actually answer your question from 15 minutes ago, rather than to pick a single product, I would say that Microsoft launched a bunch of stuff, and we're still in the middle of it. Office is coming, but Windows 8, Windows Phone 8, and Surface all launched right around the same kind of long weekend. That is an amazing thing. I mean, if only Office could have launched on the same weekend, it would have been even more incredible. And by the way, also the server stuff, new version of Server came out about a month earlier, but, same rough time period. So this kind of launch wave is just unprecedented, I would say, in the history of Microsoft. And I think will have ramifications, probably for the wider industry as well for a long, long time.
Absolutely. What's interesting is neither one of us had an Apple product on this list.
Yeah, and by the way, I wouldn't take that the wrong way. So, for example, the iPhone 5 is great, evolutionary, great. The iPad Mini is great, evolutionary, right? It's a response to things that other companies were doing. There's nothing wrong with those products. The Retina display versions of the MacBook Pro is beautiful. Yeah, nice. I don't use them. I don't care about them personally, but I get why people would like them. It's fine. It's just I don't really. There's nothing. If you look back over this year, there's no Apple thing where you can say, "Wow, they really surprised people." I mean, I suppose the iPad 3 that was from earlier this year. So
the iPad 3, the third and the fourth
this year. Yeah,
we got two iPads. We got two iPads in 1 year, and see, this is what shocks me. Apple released
all this stuff is revolutionary. It's just evolutionary.
Yeah, nothing big. But Apple released.
And by the way, but again, I just want to be clear though, because I'm sorry to interrupt.
Go ahead.
I just get accused of bashing Apple a lot, and sometimes certainly it's justified. But I am not denigrating the company at all for doing what it did. It's got a very big market position it needs to protect, but it just didn't do anything revolutionary or particularly super interesting this year as a byproduct of that. It's fine. It's not like a criticism. It's just a fact. It's not a big deal. They obviously have tons and tons of excellent stuff.
I think the iPhone 5 was a big step. They changed the display size. They went bigger. I mean, that was something that we were kind of expecting at this point. But I also think that's something that haunts Apple, and it's the fact that we expect certain things. And when it finally lives up to the hype, we knew about it a year ago. When it doesn't live up to the hype, we say, well, oh, look, they didn't add it.
Yep. Well, by the way, still an enviable position to have, right? In some ways. Unfortunately, Apple's biggest fans are never going to be disappointed by anything that they do. A lot of regular consumers don't seem to be too disappointed by anything they do. So, whatever. I mean, we can talk about how they're just evolutionary every year, and they still are going to sell like gangbusters. So, yeah, I just, I don't.
But one example is they released two iPads this year. They released the third generation new iPad,
yes.
And very, nonchalantly.
That's irritating.
It is.
Isn't it?
It is. It's really irritating. But the way that they did it with the last one was amazing. It was like this whole oh yeah, by the way, we got a new iPad. Here we go. Okay, let's move on now.
Good night. Yeah, exactly.
We're not going to talk about it.
Yeah.
And I'm curious on why they did it that way. I wonder if they did it that way.
An iPad 3 person,
Oh, you've been fuming.
Would have been very upsetting. That would have been very upsetting. I think it's, well, actually, okay. I'm sorry. Apple did, of course, the reason they did that is because they have this new Lightning adapter, right? That's the only reason that thing exists.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, they did do that. But you know what's interesting to me? What they didn't do, normally what they've done is they've sold two iPads. They've sold the older generation and a newer generation. Well,
you're really burned by this. This is like a pet peeve of yours.
It really is. This really bothers me. And that's fine. I understand that. It's $100 cheaper. That's fine. But now they have the iPad 2 on the market.
Yeah.
And an iPad that's 2 generations separated from the iPad 2. The iPad 2 is still the same price. And the iPad 3 is gone. Off the market. Never existed. Here's the new one.
Yeah. Literally, yeah. It's a strange thing.
It's bizarre to me, and I could understand now what they're probably going to do now is have two iPads, one Retina, one non-Retina.
Yeah, I think so.
Why wouldn't you just? And to me, a lot of people went and got the second generation one because it's cheaper and it's the second generation one. But now why is it called the iPad 2? If this is the case, you just have iPad and iPad Retina.
You're gonna have to move past this.
I can't. And you know what else irks me? And I'm going to go on this one.
This is not in keeping with the theme of the show.
I know. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Okay, so I'll go into this one. The new iPod Touch, great device.
Yeah.
Great device.
Beautiful. In fact, that thing is so skinny, like so thin. It's almost surreal. It's amazing. I have no doubt that when they realized they could make this thing, that they set out to say, look, we're going to have an iPhone 6 someday, and this is how thin it's.
This is how. Yeah, it's
because
a beautiful
it's
device.
Amazing. Yes.
The display is stunning. The size is great. It's super thin.
Yep.
This is why I don't have it on my list. I don't have it on my list because of the price point.
It's because they're still selling the other one.
They're still selling the other one.
Oh boy, I just don't have
at
it
the
on the
same
list because
price.
It's just the same thing again. I mean, in other words, obviously, it's just an evolution. The iPhone 5 is beautiful. I get it; it's beautiful, but come on, it's an iPhone 4S with an extra row of icons.
But Paul, you know what they did? It's not like they added, it's like, oh, here's the old one, and here's the new one. They literally didn't release a 16 gig version so they could still sell the old one.
Well, okay, I'm not again. You're putting me in an uncomfortable position.
Why am I getting crazy with this? Am I the only one?
You are getting crazy with it. Here's my devil's advocate response to what you just said. I'm not saying I even 100% believe this, but there's a case to be made. When you have a higher resolution screen, like the iPod Touch, new whatever it is, 5th generation has, what is it, 960 by 640 or something?
Something like that.
Almost HD. The content that you put on there takes up more space. So you can put HD movies on that thing. You can play, like Retina games and so forth. Those things are going to occupy more storage space on the storage. I'm guessing that would be their excuse/reason for that.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense.
When Amazon went to an HD resolution display on the Kindle Fire HD this year, they said we can't do 8 gigs. It has to be 16.
Interesting.
And that was the reason.
But Apple went 32.
Again, right. I'm not.
Well, you know what's bizarre?
I don't have a
when you're defending Apple. When you're defending Apple, and I'm screaming about something that Apple did,
the world has gone crazy.
Oh yeah, it's the end of the world is 2 days away.
Again, notable. Apple's not on the list. Again, not because they didn't do anything, not because they did anything wrong, just because they do what Apple does, and it just wasn't revolutionary. That's all. It's fine.
With Apple, and this is my thing, they actually this year I think they had a stellar year with new products. They released that new the iMac, which is beautiful. Yeah, beautiful. It's a really pretty device. I mean, display and the whole thing. It's just amazing. And again, it's the evolution of Apple. They released the new MacBook Pro Retinas. They released the iPod Touch, a new iPhone. This is probably one of the first years in a long time that they've revamped everything unanimously.
Sure. Yep.
And it's not on my list. And I'm an Apple user. Why is it on my list? Is it because I've kind of learned to accept and kind of expect it? No, I'll tell you why.
Because you're so burned by the fact that they're selling the old iPod Touch.
I can't get over it.
You can't get over.
Yeah. I really can't.
You can't get over that hump.
I really, really can't. It bothered me so much to the point that I got so turned off from this thing.
I'll just say, again, you're doing this. It's weird because you're putting me in this weird spot, and someone's going to be able to make like a clip show where I just do nothing but talk nice about Apple. But, Apple is this company that got blown away in the PC market because they were the single supplier not making the same thing that everyone else made. So 5% market share forever. That was their fate. A lot of people looked at Apple over the past decade and said, yeah, they're doing great, but someone else is going to come out with an iPod type thing that's going to sell pretty well. They're going to get pushed out of that market. Someone else is going to come out with a smartphone that's going to push them out of the market. Someone else is going to come out with a tablet, et cetera, et cetera. The PC model is occurring to them again in smartphones and tablets. And so rather than roll over like they did, they're trying something new. They're not going to license their OS and let other people sell it, obviously. So they've got this. It's an interesting strategy. It's one that I also have a little bit of a problem with, for whatever it's worth. But I'm just, to explain it. When you're competing with Samsung, which sells multiple different kinds of phones and devices, and HTC and Motorola and Google now, and whoever else, and you're just Apple and you just sell the one thing. I mean, one of the ways you can compete is to sell the older products for less money, and it's not bad. I mean, it's a pretty good response. It's a pretty, I don't want to say innovative, but it's an interesting way to address an age-old problem that did burn you in the past. And so at least they're doing something. you know.
But you know what will affect them, in my opinion, with this, when the iPad 2, when you're buying an iPad 2 and someone else buys an iPad 3, and the software that they're creating, iOS 6, whatever, and the next one, it's truly optimized for the latest version of that product.
Of course it is, but that's how they get people to upgrade.
But that's how they get people to upgrade, but that's also how they get people to have a poor user experience with the device. When they're still selling iPad 2s 2 years after it's released.
I listen, I agree with you. I'm just, there's something very interesting where you come out, and this is something Apple runs into all the time now. I mean, you have to walk up on a stage and say, oh my God, we've done it again. And boy, does this make that other thing we made a year ago look like crap. I mean, it's a weird deal, but it's something you have to do when you sell products.
It just shows you the evolution of the company. They're growing, and they want to sell as much as they can. They're not this, well, we only sell the best of the best, and everything else, every year we just double our speed and double this. They're becoming just like every other PC manufacturer out there because they want to sell products.
I don't know. And
then we'll move on.
I'm so uncomfortable defending this company, but they make good stuff, and I get it. Especially the hardware.
Yeah. Did I mention it was the year of the SSD? No, I don't think I did on the show. I think I mentioned it before. Before we began, we were kind of talking about some of the stuff, and I really think this year was the year of the SSD drive, and we really saw a shift in pricing for these drives, which I got one right here. I got a 256 SSD here. And we've also seen the shift that the manufacturers are putting SSDs in the computers at not that high of a premium. Do you think how much more do you think the price are going to drop next year? You think they're just going to be where standard hard drives are?
Yeah, I think they're going to be giving these things away like chiclets in a Pez dispenser or something. I mean, the rise of the SSD was so perfectly timed because it's the type of thing where if the cloud computing stuff hadn't happened, it wouldn't have made as much sense. Whereas we were escalating hard drive specs, for a long, long time. And now what you get is this thing that has no moving parts. It runs much, much cooler. And that's actually getting better all the time as well, by the way. Requires less power, gives you better battery life. It has less storage. I mean, that's just a fact of life. But we need less storage, which is an amazing about face and an amazing change. Again, brought about because of cloud computing. So the combination of cloud computing and solid state storage on devices has enabled this kind of perfect storm where our devices can be smaller and lighter and get better battery life and just enable this whole new way of doing things. And so it's a virtuous cycle or whatever you want to call it.
But I mean, when we talk about when I tell you how fast it is, it is, I mean, just night and day. I can't use a computer with a regular hard drive now. As my everyday computer, I have to have an SSD in that thing. It's so much quicker to open up applications, to do anything, to copy files over. I'm surprised more people aren't talking about this as a huge, huge plus as far as evolution of the product line goes.
What it is someone's going to eventually you upgrade, right? So you have this. You go to Best Buy and you buy one of those cheap. Well, actually, those cheap computers might have hard drives in them. I'm not even sure, but you buy an inexpensive computer. You buy a computer that has an SSD in it. It's one of the many things that contributes to that feeling that you should be having when you buy something new, which is, wow, this thing is way better than the thing I used to use. And B, why did I wait so long? When you make a purchase like that. And so it's just a nice thing. I think it's just one of the things that factors into that good feeling that you get when you do something right, and when you upgrade a computer and you get a SSD drive, that's just it's one of the most monumental things you can do these days to make it better.
What's amazing is that the pricing structure, and we kind of accepted, like, well, 256 is $200 for 500, so 500 gigs is going to be, $400 or $450, but it doesn't really cost them that much more to add, a gig. You know what I mean? Like the fact that we kind of accept these prices, it's funny to me that there's such a big leap in the price. But next year, I mean, we're going to be putting 500 gig SSDs in these computers for $200. I mean, that's just how it works.
Yeah, although I wonder if we'll even need them,
Yeah, that's an interesting thing to think about. Are we going to need these terabyte hard drives in 2 years? Because everything is going to be on the cloud. How much data are we going to store on these computers?
Right. I mean, you're triggering email just as you say that.
Well, no, I definitely want. I want to hear that.
People just will never buy into that. But
I know.
But yes, I happen to think yes that you're right. I mean, obviously, content is always, and you're going to have some content locally, and that's always going to be an issue, I guess. But
I mean, before YouTube existed, we would find a funny video, download that video, and put it on a drive.
Yeah.
Whatever. If it was like I'll give you one example. I have like a collection of, this is really depressing, 9/11 news videos from that day.
Sure.
And I have it on my hard drive. Now, I could delete those now, but I still have it there because I always had it. But that mindset of like hoarding stuff like this, it's going to be totally out the window because I just go to YouTube and I find the video. The same exact video that I had from 12 years ago is on YouTube somewhere with much better quality.
This has always been the dream, back in the, just coming from a Microsoft background, back in the mid-1990s, Microsoft had a project, I think it was called Tiger, which was basically any video content anytime on demand. That obviously we could walk up to a TV on Monday night. I don't know what's on Monday night, but Monday night, and you watch whatever shows are on Monday night, and that's how how we used to do it in the 1950s. But ideally, you should be able to get this on-demand type system where you're like, well, we're going to watch, the Game of Thrones season 1, and we're going to watch it in order, and it's just going to be available. And obviously, there are interim steps to getting there. Netflix is part of that, and Hulu Plus, and the on-demand that you have on your TV is part of it. But eventually there'll be this one thing, and maybe it will be called YouTube. It's kind of hard to say, but YouTube is not great in some ways because the quality is not always there and so forth. But it is constantly amazing how often you can go to YouTube and type in something and get it.
I found there was a commercial from the early 90s that I was looking for. I didn't have the name. I just had like a description of that thing. I can't even remember what it was. I was doing it with my wife the other day. Oh boy, that sounded bad too. I was searching for it with my wife, and I just put the description in YouTube, and boom, the video was there.
Yep.
I mean, that's the amazing thing, and the fact that we're in 2012 now, and everything is on the cloud. Everything we do is on the cloud. Even the people that hate the cloud, guess what? Everything is on the cloud. That's what you're using. You're using Gmail. You're using YouTube. You're using all these music services. This is where we've evolved to at this point in this year. And I think 2012 was a major, major shift in this. Like YouTube was in 2004, 2005, I think we've seen the same shift for data now rather than content.
Yeah.
I think it's cool. Now, we're approaching the end of the show. This was the last show for the year, for 2012.
Okay.
What do you, now, as far as a big story, what do you think was the biggest story for 2012 for technology? We've spoken about the products, but what do you think was oh, wow?
From this year. Oh, boy. I wasn't really prepared for that. I mean,
I know, me either. I just thought of it.
Again, because I primarily cover Microsoft, Steven Sinofsky leaving Microsoft, and then I would say Scott Forstall leaving Apple were both kind of shocking and stories that I think have more going on behind the scenes than we know about, and that maybe there'll be books written about it someday or whatever where we can, find out more. But we'll have ramifications going forward for technology in very huge ways. Like Johnny Ives is now running the software design for iOS.
Yeah.
That's pretty freaking huge.
I was actually going to say the shift.
By the way,
Microsoft,
he could crash and burn. We don't know that he's any good at this, but
these are two major positions that have changed. Two major people in both companies. One is out, and one is getting more control. Now they're getting control of software. These are major stories that we're going to see play out in 2013 for the better or for the worst.
Yep.
So I do agree with you on that. I think one major thing that people, it became a big deal, and we're seeing some of that story come out today, is privacy. I think there were a lot of privacy stories out there, a lot of issues with the way that we are conducting our social networking information. We're just putting everything out there. And I think this year people are more aware of, hey, listen, maybe I should pull back. Maybe I shouldn't put that picture of me giving the finger to a cop. Like, I think that's starting to change also. And that was a big year for that. I mean, it's a huge story today. Instagram, something with their privacy stuff. I haven't read the entire story. I'm not going to go into detail. I'm saying something because we're running out of time. But people are deleting their Instagram profiles now. And I've always gone into it knowing, listen, whatever I do on the internet is there forever.
I think that, well, you're a little more tech savvy than most people.
Yes,
obviously.
I am, Paul. So, I am tech savvy.
I think that these things are self-regulating in the sense that the issues are raised. It happens a lot with Facebook. It's happening now with Instagram. People are suddenly confronted by this notion that, wait, you mean when I put something up on the public internet that anyone can see it? That it's just a factor of how quickly technology moves, and that I think these things will all be ironed out. I don't know. Even something like Gmail, right? You can go into some interface and download everything to your computer if you want it. They have that little get out of here kind of functionality. I mean, Facebook someday is going to have it will make the sound of a toilet flushing, and it will erase everything that you ever did on Facebook. Maybe. I think that people getting alarmed and complaining and it being a news story is what will drive the change, whether it's the companies themselves and the services doing it themselves, or whether it is regulated by federal or international law.
Yeah.
That it will eventually just happen.
In the
that's
chat,
how I think it. That's how I
you're right.
it.
In the chat, Mustang17 said that the change that Twitter and Facebook and services like this could change the entire world. The globalization of, everybody and everything has really shifted things. I mean, we saw the Arab Spring happen, but I mean, to the extent that government shut down the internet in those countries to kind of pull back and to kind of not allow the information to spread, where the internet was taken as a joke even 15 years ago. People were like, oh, yeah, this thing's going to blow over. Who's going to use it?
Well, the internet used to be a mode, right? You used to sit down in front of your computer and you would do stuff. And then you would be, you'd make that modem connection, would make that funny sound, and then you would do stuff online quickly.
Yeah.
And then you would get offline. It used to be like a thing you would go in and out of, Today, the internet is pervasively wrapped in everything that we do. And it's to the point where a lot of us would be completely lost when faced with a device or a computer that couldn't, that wasn't online. We wouldn't know what to do with ourselves.
Yeah, it totally rewired us if you look at that. If you look at the big picture, when I'm disconnected from the internet, it's like the end of the world.
Well, it's the Guinness Book of World Records, right? The reason that exists, it was a drinking thing in Ireland, right? That people would get into debates in a pub about what was the longest distance between two islands, or whatever the thing was. And they created this Guinness Book of World Records.
I had no idea. That's funny.
That's why they created it, right? So now we have this instant version of it, right? Where we don't have to sit around and say, oh, what was the name of that thing? And we have it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's an amazing thing. And so you and I kind of grew into this world, but the people who are coming up now, my children, for example, will never remember a world where that wasn't the case. And it really changes the way you think of things, because there's nothing you can't find out.
Oh, everything is there.
Right. You talked about a commercial from the 1990s. You don't even need to know what the product was for. You can sort of vaguely type in, it was something with a something. I was sitting in a bar at this time, actually, but there was a football game on, and a commercial for Survivor came on, which I could not care less about, this TV show. But what flickered quickly, sort of almost peripheral vision, was this image of a woman who looked familiar. And I kind of looked up at the TV and I said, this is going to sound dumb, but I think I just saw Blair from The Facts of Life. And I grabbed my phone. In my case, I binged it because I have a Windows phone, but I wrote Blair, Facts of Life, Survivor. And sure enough, the woman who played Blair on The Facts of Life is on Survivor this year.
That's amazing.
Instantly, and again, this is not rocket science or anything important, but it's the type of thing that you can do instantly now and effortlessly. And that is for something nonsense, but you can do it. I have I don't want to get into this now at this late date, but I can tell you that I actually saved my life one time several years ago on a ski trip by Googling what was wrong with me.
You're kidding me.
And finding out that I had something very serious wrong with me.
You're
Which,
kidding
by the way,
me.
it's not always a great thing to do because obviously when you look up health things online, you find out you have cancer every time. But
sure.
But yeah, so this kind of capability is amazing. It's amazing.
Oh, it really is. I want to hear that story, but we got to wrap it up.
I will tell you this. It's yeah.
All right, we'll wrap it up. But I'll give you. I'm an information junkie, and I love facts, and I love history stuff. And I'm on Reddit all day on their Today I Learned section.
Okay.
And it's just random facts, and I love it. And whenever could you have done this 20 years ago?
Right.
I mean,
you just
didn't know. Like, people just didn't know things, and there was no way to know that.
In the context of like just sort of like a hobby or something you're interested in. When I was in the 1980s, when I was a kid, I was really into Commodore computers, for example, and I would buy these computer magazines, whatever they were, and I would read about stuff that happened to Commodore. And even as a young guy, I could tell that it was like a press release that Commodore had put out 3 or 4 months earlier, and now was printed, and now I'm reading it. And I was thinking, even then I would think, wow, like something happened and I'm finding out about it way later, and I always felt like this needs to be better than this. It's not like I ever thought up the internet, but I used to think even back then that there would be a better way.
But who knew this would be the better way,
Yeah, nobody. But now that it's here, it's like you can't imagine life without it, and you can only imagine it getting better and better and better.
Here's one thing, and this is how we'll wrap up the show, that if it wasn't for the internet, I would have never known. The first female flight attendants had to be an unwed nurse, weigh between 100 and 118 pounds, stand between 5'4" and 5'6", and had to be 20 to 26 years old.
Or as we would call them, Andrew, the perfect woman.
The perfect woman. But I mean, how would I have ever known that?
Yeah.
So it's interesting stuff, and this is the beauty of it. And we're in 2012, going into 2013. Paul, I want to thank you for a great year on What the Tech.
Thank you.
We were nominated for an award this year that we lost to Leo Laporte.
Begrudgingly.
By the way, I heard I'm sleeping with Leo.
There's all kinds of crazy stuff going on.
I don't know. I heard that on one. I got a lot of messages on Thursday from Windows Weekly saying that Leo and I have been having an affair. I've been sleeping together.
Teaming. Yeah, it's
and I have to say, it's all true. It's all true. Paul,
gross.
Gross. Paul, thanks again for a great year. We're going to be back for the new year because next week is obviously Christmas, and the following one is the first. So we're not going to have a show that day either. Maybe we can move the show to like Wednesday or Thursday. I don't know. We should do it. Yeah, because we're going to be off for a couple of weeks. But when we come back, we're going to be having our annual what we look forward to show.
Yes.
So we're going to be talking
I look forward to there being 3 new iPads next year.
Who knows? But let's get crazy. Maybe 4. Maybe 4 iPads. Every quarter they'll release a new one.
Quarterly
iPads. Yeah. And you snap them together and it becomes a super iPad. I think that'd be great. But I want to hear from you guys. I want to hear what you guys think will be a great product in 2013, what you're looking forward to in 2013. You can send an email to guysfromqueens@gmail.com. And we'll read your emails. We'll do that next for the next show. So that's it, guys. Have a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. And we'll see you all next year on here